Hey everybody, my name is Emily. Welcome to my homestead and to week 1 of the 2025 Three Rivers Challenge. The Three Rivers Challenge is a pantry challenge hosted by Jessica at Three Rivers Homestead, where the rules are that you make up your own rules, but the basic gist of it is that you eat out of your pantries for those 2 months without going to the grocery store. We will be making the exception in our family of purchasing milk at the store. And this is our second year doing this challenge. Last year was our first year. It was also when I started my YouTube channel, was with these videos. Last year we were not prepared for this challenge. I hadn't gone to the store in advance to get like the last round of things before it started. And we had just recently moved to our homestead at the end of October and hadn't stocked up. Before we moved, we kind of ate through a lot of things we had stored up so we wouldn't have to move them with us, and we hadn't gotten stocked back up by the time the pantry challenge started, so there were many things that it was a little harder than it normally would be for us, the way I like to keep the pantry stocked. So now at this time, being here for over a year, I've got the pantry back, slowly built it up where I wanted it to be. So I think we've got, plenty of food and plenty of supplies that we won't be needing to go to the grocery store in February. Last year we gave ourselves a $100 budget for the month of February, in addition to purchasing milk. And we were able to keep it under that amount. And even get some, special treats for the kids and things like that. But I've also been able to stock up over the year on a couple extra snacks that they like to have, just so they won't feel like they're completely, missing out on what they think is really important. So if you're new here, welcome. And if you're not new here and have seen some of my other videos, you know that I am 4 to 5 months behind on editing and posting videos that I made like over the summer and the fall of my other homestead activities, like taking care of the animals and the garden. It's my New Year's resolution to get caught up and become current before spring hits, and I have more stuff to do outside. But I will be flip-flopping for the pantry challenge, going back and forth between posting these videos for the pantry challenge and the other content, just so I can get back to more current video posting. But I did not want to miss out on doing the pantry challenge videos because I was kind of excited about it, and my niece was asking if I was going to do it, which I was planning to do it, but she's learning how to cook, and so she's kind of excited about watching the pantry challenge videos. So that's where we're at, and maybe next week I will post a pantry tour video along with the meals. I just haven't felt like getting down there and cleaning up in that area. The pantry itself, the shelves are fairly organized, but we've got a renovation project going on in the basement that's kind of like halted and in the middle, and there's just building materials on the floor in front of my pantry shelves, so I haven't really felt like tackling that. So hopefully I'll be feeling up to that next week. So now here are the videos of what we had for dinner from the 1st of January through Saturday the 4th. Our family traditionally likes to have corned beef and cabbage on New Year's Day, so that is what I'm making on New Year's Day. I got a corned beef from the store. I'm going to add it to the crock pot. I don't usually include the little packet of seasonings because I don't like biting into the peppercorns and mustard seeds and whatever else is in there. But I go ahead and add the meat to the crock pot. And then I grab a cabbage, the refrigerator that actually was grown in our garden, take off the outer leaves, cut off the bottom stem, and then cut it into quarters and remove the heart. And then I will add that to the crock pot with a little bit of water and set it on low. This will cook most of the day. I'm doing this around noon this day, and I will come back to it in the evening when it's time to get the carrots and potatoes prepped. It's now early evening, and I'm getting the carrots ready to go to cook, to have with this meal. We like to have the corned beef and cabbage with carrots and potatoes, and these are carrots that I actually grew in my garden. They're varying sizes, but they taste really good, and this is my best carrot year ever. Even if only what I get is in this bag here, but there are actually a ton still out in the garden that hopefully aren't ruined from being covered in inches of snow and then all of that thawing out and then getting covered with snow again. But we will see. That was on my list of things to do before winter set in, and it just didn't get done. But if nothing else, I still have more carrots in this bag than I've ever successfully grown before. So that's still a win, even if it's not as big of a win as I wanted it to be. I'm adding the chopped carrots into a steam basket that I'm going to put inside of a pan with a little bit of water in the bottom to steam them on the stove until they're fork tender. Once I get these carrots going on the stove, I've got some red potatoes I have scrubbed up that I'm going to chop and add to a pot of boiling water and also cook those until they are fork tender. I also add a little bit of salt to the water while it's boiling to help flavor the potatoes a bit. Unfortunately, these are not potatoes that we grew in our garden, as we used those up. But here is the final meal ready to be served up, and it was very delicious. The corned beef just melted in your mouth, and everybody really enjoyed it. Day 2, I am mixing up a spice rub to go on a whole chicken. Got black pepper, garlic powder, onion powder, chili powder, and salt. The chili powder is by accident. I meant to grab the paprika. That's what I usually use, but the chili powder was fine, and we didn't really notice a big difference in the flavor. So here's your reminder to double check your spice labels when you're grabbing everything out, because there was one time I mixed up chili powder with ground red pepper, and that is not something you want to do if you want your children to eat dinner. I also add some brown sugar to this mixture. This chicken is one that our family raised in the spring of 2023. We still have a few of these left, but we did order more chickens to raise this spring and summer, so we can refill the freezer with chickens again. So once I get the chicken out of its packaging and into a baking dish, I rub it down with the spice mixture on both sides of the bird, and then I add pads of butter across the top and a little bit inside as well. This bird will go into a 400-degree oven. I suggest checking it at around 45 minutes to make sure the bird isn't browning too much on the top. If it is, you can cover the top with a little bit of aluminum foil to prevent burning. But my bird took a little over an hour to reach temperature. When I thought the chicken would be almost ready, I started getting our side dishes ready. The first one is a pot of white rice. I add 2 cups of rice, 4 cups of water, some salt, and some butter, and I put that on the stove to boil. Once it's boiling, a lid will get put on and it will be brought down to simmer for 14 minutes. This is way more rice than my family will eat at one meal, but I like to make more than is necessary so that I can have a quick ingredient to add to something later on in the week. Our other side dish is going to be green beans. These are obviously from the store. We do have some home canned green beans down on the pantry shelf, but I have a few more cans of these. We bypassed the store green beans for homegrown green beans around Thanksgiving and Christmas holidays and used our homegrown and home canned stuff for those holidays. So I'm adding 2 cans of green beans, some salt, and a little bit of bacon grease to this, and I'm going to heat this up in the microwave with a lid for about 3.5 minutes. And here is the completed meal ready to be served. Another family favorite. On this third night of January, I am cutting up a delicata squash. I purchased this at the store. I do have seeds to grow this variety, but have never successfully grown it, and so I thought that I would buy a couple and just see how they tasted. It actually tasted really good. It is sweeter than an acorn squash. I think acorn squash has been one of my favorite in the limited number of types of squash that I've tried, but it has this kind of aftertaste to me that this delicata squash did not have. And I think, the kids actually enjoyed it a little bit more. They're not big squash fans, but they ate this better than they usually eat the acorn squash. So I'm glad that I have seeds for this, and I hope I'm going to be able to have space in my garden for this winter squash this next growing season. So I cut it in half, I scoop out the seeds, and then I place it in a glass baking dish, cover it with saran wrap, and microwave it for about 9 minutes until it's tender. The next step is to carefully, because the squash is hot, scoop out the insides into a bowl, and once you get all of that in there, add a little bit of butter and a little bit of brown sugar. I probably added more brown sugar than I needed to for this squash, as it was sweeter than the acorn squash that we are more used to. So for this amount of squash, I would add a pinch of salt, 2 tablespoons of butter, and about a tablespoon of brown sugar. And you might not even need the brown sugar if your kids like squash more than mine do. We are also going to have some homemade cranberry sauce that I made just this past December. My youngest had requested we have some sort of meal that cranberry sauce would go well with, and I meant to serve it with the whole, roasted chicken we had the other night, but forgot, so we're going to have it with this meal tonight. And here is the meal ready to serve with some of that leftover roasted chicken, cranberry sauce, California blend vegetables, and the delicata squash. This fourth night of the year, we are going to have a mixture of leftovers with new items to make a beef vegetable soup. I start with peeling a few more homegrown carrots and then chop them up into small bite-sized pieces that we will add to our pot. This is a meal that my family had a lot when I was growing up, but I haven't really fed to my own family very much. The main reason for this is because my grandmother and mother used to make huge batches of canned mixed vegetables, and we would dump a can of tomatoes, a jar of the mixed vegetables, and a jar of canned beef into a pot and heat it up, and that was what we called beef stew. It's really a soup because it's not thickened at all. My family hasn't canned beef or mixed vegetables in several years. So when my mom canned some beef this fall and gave me a few jars, I have been really wanting to have beef vegetable soup, and I thought this was a good opportunity to do it. So this is the beef that my mom canned up, and in a jar of my tomatoes. The carrots are already in this pot as well, and I'm going to heat that up on the stove until the carrots are tender. Meanwhile, I pull out potatoes from our leftover corned beef and cabbage meal. I decide to peel the skins off of these as they wouldn't be very appetizing in soup form. And then I get them chopped up into bite-sized pieces to add to the soup later. Since the carrots still have a ways to cook, I go ahead and start making biscuits. This is my grandma's recipe that isn't really a recipe. It's all by sight and feel and memory. It's self-rising flour with shortening, and once I get that all mixed up into sort of a cornmeal texture, I make a well in the middle and add a bunch of milk. More milk than you would think. It needs to be just a little bit sticky. And once that's all incorporated, I go ahead and flour the counter and start kneading it out on the counter. Everybody always raved about my grandma's biscuits, and I don't think I make them quite as well as she did, but I also don't make them as often as she did. She grew up during the Depression, and they had biscuits every single meal, and she was in charge of making them, so she can really make a fantastic biscuit. Once I get this kneaded to the consistency that I'm looking for, I start rolling it out. Maybe a little less than a half an inch thick. I really never measure, just kind of how much I feel it should be. And then, just like my grandma, I use a Coca-Cola glass. That's what she used, and when she passed away, I inherited the ones she had in her cabinet, and I use those to cut my biscuits just like she did. In my opinion, that's the only good use for a Coca-Cola glass. So I get them all rolled out and placed right up against each other on the baking sheet. These are going to bake in a 475-degree oven for 8 to 10 minutes. You just have to keep an eye on them. They go from not done to done very quickly. The carrots are finally tender enough that I can start adding the rest of the ingredients. First, I add in the potatoes that I chopped up. I add in some frozen peas that we shelled from our garden over the summer. And then we add in some leftover green beans from dinner the other night. Quite a bit of green beans than I would normally have in this kind of soup, but that's what we had, so just throwing them in there. I did realize at this point that I forgot to do onions. I would have sweated those in the bottom of the pan before adding anything else to the pan. But since I did forget that, I go ahead and grab onion powder from the cabinet and add quite a bit of that in there. Maybe somewhere between 1/4 and 1/2 of a teaspoon. And then get that stirred in there and let everything simmer while we bake the biscuits. Here are the biscuits ready to go into the oven. As I said before, it is 400 degrees for about 8 to 10 minutes. I think this took 11 minutes, and here is the finished product. Ready for us to serve up and eat. Thank you for watching, and I can't wait to see you in the next video. Bye!